All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're off to a good start this morning. Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Ron, along with co host Dr. Jerry and Dr. Wong. And get your duct tape ready because this is going to be one heck of a podcast. So, welcome to the Real Health Rebellion Radio. We do not bow to the broken sick care system. We're here to expose the lies, reveal the suppressed truth, and empower you to reclaim your health, your freedom, and your future. This is not your regular podcast. This is a movement and it's a rebellion, and we need everybody to be together. And today we're going to bridge the science, the spirit, the spotlight. We're going to put the spotlight on real solutions and give a voice to the pioneers who dared to challenge the status quo. So, without further ado, I want to make sure you are introduced to Dr. Jerry.
Thank you. And we're going to have a really powerful show tonight. I did my homework, so it's going to be a good one.
And then we have Dr. Wong. He is our cleanup man, and he likes to be in the fight. He's a Marine. You can't leave him in the rear with the gear. Good morning.
Morning.
Well, I'm going to start off with a monologue that I have about the corruption in science in these journals. And then Dr. Jerry and then Dr. Wong. And then if we have time at the end, we want to talk a little bit about, or I do anyway, about these Ozempic type drugs. That Dr. Wong sent me an interesting article on, and I've dissected it pretty well. And an experience I had yesterday, I went to a lecture by a PhD on cancer, and she only had one arrow in her quiver, and that is it's all genetic. So if we have time, we might go into that later. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We have a system that pretends to be built on evidence. But wait till you hear this. Over 30,000 scientific papers are retracted each and every single year. And you heard me right. 30,000 pieces of so-called trusted science pulled back. And why? Because of fraud, because of errors, because of manipulation, because of conflicts of interest. And I learned that that's called COIs and just pure sloppiness. And everybody's making billions off of the reprints, the advertising, the drug company sponsored research, yet they never tell you. That's why we're here. A lot of these drug trials are ghostwritten by marketing firms. The editors have admitted refusing to publish data that threatens pharmaceutical profits. Put that in your pipe. Peer review often means one busy professor skimming through a paper on a plane. Negative findings, well, they're ones that warn us something doesn't work. Well, you know what happens to those negative ones? They're buried, they're unpublished, or they're just quietly erased. So that's the gold standard. It can be bought, it can be influenced, it can be massaged until it says exactly what the industry wants. And this is not fringe. It's not a conspiracy. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am a rebel along with my two other rebels here today. But this is the documented state of modern scientific publishing. So here, I want to, this here I need the duct tape on my head when I talk about this. This field of Alzheimer's disease. Now, I'm sure you have been told, and probably by your doctor, that amyloid is the cause of Alzheimer's disease. And we've been told that for 20 years. The amyloid plaque theory. It was built, hear this. I mean, this doesn't get you upset. Built on a single high-profile paper claiming that a type of amyloid beta caused Alzheimer's disease. You know what that paper did? It was the foundation for billions with a big dollars in research, drugs, careers, grants, tenure, and hope. But that was exposed as manipulated, falsified, and image doctored. Let's be blunt. The amyloid theory was not just wrong, it was manufactured. Researchers used spliced images, manipulated plots, and patched together data to quote unquote prove their amyloid plaque caused memory loss. Think about it. For 20 years, for 2 decades, scientists who challenged the narrative were either ignored, unfunded, or ridiculed. Meanwhile, what happened? Alzheimer's rates have skyrocketed. Every drug targeting amyloid has failed. Families were left broken, spiritually, emotionally, and monetarily. Billions were wasted. And the true case causes of Alzheimer, like inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial collapse, electromagnetic fields, toxins, sleep disruption, they were just sidelined. You never heard about them because one fraudulent trial led the entire world into a dead end. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when marketing masquerades as medicine, when journals become corporations, and when peer reviews become pay to play. Now, let's bring in Dr. Jerry because you deserve to hear what he has to say. This is really important.
Well, thank you very much, the headmaster. And the key in the equation is that the average physician is 20 years behind the research. So how do you know the medical system's corrupt? Just ask the medical experts. Two famous quotations sums it all up. Dr. Marcia Angell, she was the ex-editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, not a typical rag sheet, but one of the tops in the world from 1999 to 2000. Her quote, and I'm quoting directly from her, "It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or rely on the judgment or trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine." And another editor-in-chief was Richard Horton of the Lancet. He had 30 years as editor-in-chief. And I quote him, "The case against science is straightforward. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue." And the problem is we don't know which half is untrue. Afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, as Dr. Ron referred to, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analyses, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance, science has taken a turn towards darkness. In addition to the flagrant distortions of conflicts of interest, manipulation of data, the immoral withholding of vital information to the human test subjects, and outright lies disseminated by the medical industry, or the release of drugs with no safety studies. Perfect example, thalidomide trials from 1950 to the 1960s used to combat nausea during pregnancy. It was given to pregnant women without adequate testing for fetal effects. It caused thousands of cases of birth defects, no hands, flipper hands, feet. I mean, it was just despicable. It's beyond imagination. Tuskegee syphilis studies, 1932 to 1972, conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service. Black men with syphilis were not told that they had the disease and were denied treatment even after penicillin became available. Researchers observed disease progression instead of providing care. This is considered one of the most egregious violations of medical ethics in the U.S. history. Then you had the Nazi medical experiments from 1930s to 45. Prisoners in concentration camps were subjected to inhumane experiments, freezing, infectious disease exposure, sterilization, high altitude testing, and it was performed without consent and often lethal. As a result, they developed a Nuremberg Code of Ethics, emphasizing voluntary consent. Well, interestingly, The medical establishment failed to apply the Nuremberg Code of Ethics when they came up with the COVID vaccine, which in reality was an experimental drug disguised as a mislabeled as a vaccine, and the US government mandated it. Just despicable, total disregard for the law and the people's health. Then you had the gain of function testing in Wuhan, documented evidence of a portion of the $600,000 grant given to the Eco Health Alliance from the U.S. agency led by Dr. Fauci's National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Disease Agency went to the Wuhan lab for gain of function to weaponize the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Isn't that amazing? Then you had a real egregious one in 1944 to 54, Quaker Oats radiation experiments performed on 36 retarded children. Nutrition and radiation studies conducted mainly between the mid-40s and 50s at the Walter E. Fernald State School in Waltham, Massachusetts, involving boys labeled at the time mentally retarded, sponsored in part by Quaker Oats Company, MIT, and the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. They gave these children radioactive cereals to track where the nutrients went in the body. They were never told that they were given radioactive material. No consent forms. Absolutely despicable. And another major character assassination or suppression of information was carried out by Dr. Morris Fishbein. He was the editor of the Journal of the American Medical Association from 24 to 50. Fishbein used his position to suppress alternative research or block therapies from gaining legitimacy. He ended up with enormous influence over what was published in the leading medical journal in the U.S., which effectively shaped mainstream medical discourse and what counted as acceptable medicine. He also was gatekeeper to medical orthodoxy, and he prevented the listing in the Index Medicus of the alternative therapy, so you couldn't find anything. Absolutely nuts. Anyway, for those listeners interested in gaining the truth about cancer, I recommend reading the book Politics in Healing by Daniel Haley, and of course my book Cancer Deconstructed. I also have a free 10-part docuseries on cancer on ICNR. Now, just want to leave you with two poignant quotations, one by Abraham Lincoln. You can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And the last one by Mark Twain, no amount of evidence will ever convince an idiot. So thank you for the time and to my little dissertation.
So before we get to Dr. Wong, you forgot John Kennedy's duct tape does not cure stupid.
Absolutely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, so look, so far, where we have people can receive treatments that are based on no or distorted evidence. Billions of dollars are wasted on ineffective and harmful drugs. And do you wonder why some of us don't trust science? Because we know we're leaving people vulnerable. That's why we're here today, because pharmaceutical companies make billions, universities receive grants, journals get citations. And what do you get? I can't tell you on this show, but you got false hope and no meaningful improvement. That is what corrupt publications look like in real time. And with that, let's go to Dr. Will Wong. I am going to just sit back and take notes. Hi, Dr. Wong.
How you doing, folks? Let's touch
good.
on two practical examples of false studies. The first one, when the University of Illinois with Dr. Tom Curitin back in the 60s and the 70s did all the probably the last valid research on vitamin E that was ever done. They found that it was great for cardiac patients. Cardiologists started using it, started getting very good benefits. And then we have the snowstorm from Big Pharma of studies proving that vitamin E does absolutely nothing, doesn't work for the heart, doesn't help anybody, has no physiologic effect, blah, 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 blah. You know, vitamin E doesn't work much below 400 IUs. The positive effects of vitamin E start right around 400. They peak at 3,500 IUs. So if you take a look at all of the allopathic studies that proved that vitamin E did not work, they were all done with 100, 200 IU. They made sure that they stayed under the threshold for a therapeutic or physiologic action. You know, given that same study rationale, I could prove that antibiotics absolutely do not work to kill infection. I could treat an infectious patient or a bunch of infectious patients with sub-physiologic, sub-threshold doses, and they'll still have their infection. But if I treat them with physiologic doses, super threshold doses, we get an effect. So that was the first major thing that was done. The nutritional industry is not innocent in this either. When I was a practicing naturopath, before I got into the nutritional industry in 98, 99, I practiced for 20 some odd years, and I thought the nutritional industry were the good guys. Big pharma were the bad guys, the nutrition industry were the good guys. And then I started going to conferences and nutritional industry gatherings, and they were always a group of Ivy League docs, Ivy League allopaths, who were always paired with a mathematician, and they would walk from booth to booth talking to the different manufacturers, telling them that for 60, 70 grand, they could create a study that would prove, that would validate the action of their particular product. And they would do one product at a time, 70 grand a pop. And I know of a good many companies that took them up on it.
Wow.
Now, the way that you take a look at these studies, when you take a look at a study, whether it's the studies created from whole cloth, as a British Medical Journal editor told us, or the studies created from whole cloth that these guys from Harvard and Yale were doing, if you take a look at the numbers are always wrong. There's always something wrong with the numbers, and most folks can't tell. I barely passed statistics. My professor had to curve my exam 3 different ways to get me to pass. But I do remember that when the results of studies don't match observed reality, the study is invalid. They're telling us it's the other way around, that we're invalid, that this thing is supposed to work, the COVID vaccines are supposed to work, etc. But so it takes the order of a forensic accountant to look at the numbers and say, wait a minute, that's wrong. That can't be that because this is that and that. And no idea how they do it. I'm dyslexic. Numbers are a jumble to me. But we had one study that we were asked to look at from a particular nutritional company, and they had paid 67 grand for this study. And the study was done, and you looked at it, and it was extremely flawed. These guys were really pushing it. And we had an in-house accountant back then who was also a forensic accountant, and she looked at the numbers and immediately spotted where the bullshit was. So we can tell if we use a bit of accounting in discipline, we can tell which studies are valid and which studies are not. And I will tell you flat on that after 25 years now in the nutritional industry is guilty about creating false studies as as big pharma is.
Wow. Wow, that's really enlightening because a lot of us that went went more natural and complementary had some mistrust in the nutritional industry then.
I think,
Yep.
Dr. Run, we have to come out with a Zagat book on Indian shamans that we can go through when we have a health problem.
The
Well,
best guy to follow would be Sun Bear. He was a Shoshone medicine man, and his advice is actually very good.
I just read, and I think Dr. Jerry reads John Rappaport, and this morning he came out with a report. I don't know if you read it, Dr. Jerry, about Pfizer being fined over the last 20 years over $11 billion because of falsification of data. And the latest one, their new flu vaccine, they compared it to an old flu vaccine, not a placebo, not distilled water, not sugar or anything. They compared it to another vaccine, and of course it looked good because they already had the results written up before they tried it.
I think it's a money laundering system and give you the illusion that they're really policing the pharmaceutical industry, and the money that they get fined is just the kickbacks to the establishment.
Well, it is a shame because people suffer. People suffer, and so there is a little chart here. Maybe we can comment on it if I can get it to come up. Uh, about how you might spot false medical research. And as we've been saying, follow the money. If the funding comes from the company making the drug or the product being tested, you have to ask that. You have to ask that question. Who funded the study? Who has conflict of interest? Who is on the payroll of that company? Who owns stock in that company that has their name on these studies? And we've already alluded to small study size. Sometimes there's only 5 or 10 people, and they have these great conclusions. It applies to the population. Well, you have to know how big the size is. I'd like to go to talk about what I do understand a little bit about is relative and absolute results. And they use this. They started this with the statins. If you put 100 patients on a statin and you put 100 patients on nothing, and the nothing group has 2 deaths, and the statin group has 1 death, now they say, well, 2 is double 1. So you have a 50% less chance of having a heart attack if you're on a statin. I hope you get that. But the real result is should be an absolute risk, and that would be 2/10 versus 1/10, which is nothing. So they use this with impunity, and you have to know what they're talking about. The control group, we just alluded to that. Sometimes the control group they give the control group magnesium shots or whatever. They make sure that the control group has more symptoms than their drug. And beware of extremely positive results. If something walks like a duck and looks like a duck, it's a duck. That's what Dr. Wong had just said. If you smell that it's not right, it's probably not right. So, and please ask your physicians these hard questions. Ask them who funded the study. I'll go back to about a month ago when a neighbor of mine asked me about going on a particular drug for her cholesterol. She's 85 years old, and they wanted to give her infusions of this drug. I looked at the studies. It was funded by the drug company. Everybody had a conflict of interest that wrote this study, and it lowered LDL, and that's a whole other story. That was their endpoint, not if it helped them with heart disease or strokes or whatever. No, the study was based on whether it lowered the LDL only, and it was like $1,000 a month.
Wow.
Geez.
It's a guaranteed annuity. That's what it is.
It is incredible. It really is. I mean, and I just hope our listeners become aware of this. And if do you have anything else to add? Because I would like to just talk a little bit about the GLP-1 drugs for diabetes that I guess they treated all the diabetics they want to at $1,000 a month. Now they say it can cure or treat cancer. Anybody hear that?
No.
No.
They said that's the next gold rush, in my opinion. I'm going to first of all, I want to just pull up on my computer the definition of a black box warning. A black box warning is known as a box warning. It's the most serious safety warning that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration can require for a prescription drug labeling. It is designed to alert the healthcare providers and patients about significant risks of serious life-threatening adverse effects in that drug or any of the drugs in that family. Now we have these drugs. I want to go lose weight. I'm going to go get and see if I can get a shot, whatever. And they're saying, oh, of course you want to get that. And it's good for colon cancer, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? How many of our listeners and how many of us know that there is a black box warning on Ozempic-like drugs? And that is it can possibly cause thyroid tumors and cancer. Now, that's beside all the other side effects that we've talked about. So I get tongue tied when I talk about this, because here we're prioritizing money over the patient's health. If it can cause cancer in the thyroid, do you think it might be possible it can cause other cancers while you're losing weight? And I think we've talked about it ourselves. Once you get that sarcopenia, you don't get those muscle back. You know, you look like one of this famous doctor who hasn't gotten anything right in a long time, but he's always talking about exercise, and he looks like he just came out of a concentration camp. So I think we all know who I'm talking about. So anyway, so be careful. Ask about black box warnings. I'm pretty sure. I would bet money that most physicians who prescribe them, this for weight loss, do not know that there's a cancer warning on the Ozempic drugs. Okay, so any other thoughts?
Yeah, I got one thought. I had an interesting patient referred to me with throat cancer, and he said, I'll start your treatment after I do my chemo. So anyway, he finished his chemo. He looked like he walked out of Auschwitz, sick as hell. But he wants a list of my cured cancer patients so he can, get a testimonials from these people. So I sent him back an email, and I said, Frank, how many chemotherapy patients did you interview before you started treatment? I never got a response from the guy. So it just shows you how effective the medical industry is in brainwashing people to accept poisonous drugs as a main therapy for cancer, and have to question the non-invasive effective ways. I mean, they really got the world by the jugular.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, everybody's chasing money. The system is broken in science. Corruption is infiltrating everything that I see. So we're going to try and point it out for you. We're not powerless. We have a little bit of a movement going here, and I do appreciate you tuning into the Real Health Rebellion Radio. But we got to take back control, and we're just getting started.
Well, I'm going to leave you with a very important last statement. Be wary of young surgeons and old barbers.
And don't talk politics in the barber while you're getting a shave. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you hear from Dr. Jerry, Dr. Wong, and myself, I would ask you to please share this YouTube or Instagram or Rumble station that you're listening to, uh, just share with your friends. See if we can get the word out. And we're doing this as a service. We're not making any money, and that's not money's not even the point of it. We just want to make sure you are educated about what's going on. The next time you hear about a new miracle drug, ask who funded the study. If it's the company selling it, please be skeptical. And with that, I have nothing else. Dr. Wong, I appreciate your insight. That was valuable. Dr.
Thank
Jerry,
you for having
thank
me
you,
on
my
board.
friend. And next week, we will have something a little bit different for you next week. It'll be in the drug field. I'm hoping to have a whistleblower come on the program and tell us what really happens behind the scenes when drugs are produced. So thank you, everybody. God bless. Have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
Be well. God bless.